Hello, everyone. Welcome to Magic and Media, the podcast brought to you by the Vibe Collective and me, Carly D. This podcast blends magic with the current pop culture news and moments to show you that magic is all around us every day. We just have to look around and find it. So we find the metaphysical and the magic in the world all around us and share it with you. Welcome to Magic and Media. This week we have a couple interesting topics. We're definitely going to talk about the current energy, the astrological energy that we've all kind of been going through the last week, and just the kind of new things coming up, right? We have Easter coming up, so we'll talk about the spring equinox and how we see that show up, and we will end this week's episode talking about Aries season. So Aries season just started really over the weekend. So we will talk about Aries, what to expect in Aries season, and of course talk about a few famous Aries, because I do think that looking at pop culture and celebrities is very helpful with astrology and just kind of seeing what it looks like on the world's stage. So let's jump right in to our first topic this week, which is the Pisces new moon that actually happened last week. So we're recording this on the 26th. This new moon was actually last Tuesday. So in March, it would have been, I think it was the 18th. But this Pisces new moon that we had last week was very emotional. Think crying, facing reality, facing hard truths, and having to sit in some uncomfortable feelings that then will push us to pursue the change we want, especially the change we want to see as we go into Aries season. So with the Pisces new moon last week, if you were feeling emotional, if you had some crying days or just some challenging days, know that that was to kind of show you and have you really immersed almost in maybe the things that we need to change, and almost like glaring looking at us, like what needs to change, what needs to be different. This all ties into this eclipse season that we're rounding out or kind of ending, as we were ending the Mercury retrograde last week, which we will talk about. But with this Pisces new moon, if you felt those emotions, if you felt things come up, don't ignore them. Pisces also has a little air of escapism with it, right? They're the dreamers, or they kind of like to disassociate from reality sometimes. So I think it was interesting that in a Pisces new moon, things felt really real for people, but I think that it did bring up a lot of emotional things, or the cups, as we say in the tarot, which can be kind of hard to face. However, I do feel those are a lot of the cycles that we needed to break this eclipse season, or that we needed to pay attention to. So this past month in general may have felt very emotionally charged for you as we were in Pisces season. We just ended it with this Pisces new moon, and we just had like double Pisces moon energy kind of all through Pisces season. So coming out of Pisces, remember, is dreamy, subconscious, kind of out of, in and out of reality, or wanting to escape from maybe some of reality. We're leaving Pisces season and going into Aries, which is fire, impulse, go for it, like take action, move forward. Very motivated energy that is very different from Pisces. So I think that Pisces just wanted us to have that last, like, pay attention to these emotions before we go into Aries season. And that's what was last week, that Pisces new moon. So if you were feeling that like weirdness last week, know that we are coming out of it, which is very good. Last week, the 20th, was also the end of the Mercury retrograde, which we've talked a lot about on this podcast. And Mercury retrograde really does kind of slow us down and present also more challenges, more things that we maybe need to pay attention to. So that ended last week as well. So last week really was just like mega kind of uncomfortable energy with Mercury retrograde ending and the Pisces new moon. But Mercury retrograde, I feel, likes to get its last couple licks in right before it ends. So if we have miscommunications with people, which is very frustrating, I think last week That was another common thing we may have seen. And I think everyone can really relate to that feeling of just being annoyed with communication, right? And that I think was last week. Like we just couldn't get our point across maybe, or we're talking in circles, or maybe communication directions, something like that failed us in some way last week before the retrograde ended. But I do think that that's why we all kind of notice a Mercury retrograde so much in astrology, because we're all communicating every day, work, home life, personal life, and trying to get our point across, trying to make connections with people. So when we have disruption in communication with the Mercury retrograde, it is something we can all relate to because we're all talking to people, we're all having these relationships. So again, so happy for that to be over last week. The Mercury retrograde can go away now. And that was the energy last week. And that is what we are leaving behind us. So on the 20th, we also moved right into the spring equinox. So on Friday the 20th, we had the spring equinox and Mercury retrograde ended all on that Friday. So we're leaving that old Mercury retrograde energy behind and saying goodbye to Pisces season. So we are moving into this new energy with the spring equinox and Aries season. So that is what we are going to talk about for our next two topics. But this is our little pop culture tie-in to what we were seeing last week with the Pisces new moon and that Mercury retrograde ending. And I want to talk about Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. So if you are a pop culture person, this has been everywhere on TMZ, People, just all over the media. So I feel we really did have to cover this in Magic and Media. I know I've talked about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives before, but they are very interesting astrologically. There is so much big things that happen to them with like the show and in their careers that line up with these big astrological events. So we are going to talk about Taylor Frankie Paul. So she is from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and she's really the lead of the show, I would say. So she was tapped to actually be the Bachelorette on ABC. So her season of The Bachelorette was supposed to start airing this past weekend. And it didn't. She had big upheaval, big change happen last week. In that time we were talking about that Pisces new moon and before the Mercury retrograde ended. So big emotions, big uncomfortableness, big having to face those habits or those cycles that we needed to get out of, right? So that is what she was seeing last week. Now, I'm not going to go into her whole story on this podcast, but essentially she was set to have this big premiere of The Bachelorette, and with personal things with her relationships, her relationship with her current baby daddy, Dakota. Basically, a video was released of her having a DV situation at her house. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, but it was very personal. This is very emotional for her. And it is, I guess, almost like, what I want to say is it was ruined, right? Like her experience was ruined, whether it be her combination of the people she's surrounding herself with, these miscommunications. But last week, definitely she would have seen that upheaval. She would have seen that change. So due to this video that came out with domestic violence charges attached to it, her season of The Bachelorette was canceled. So again, big emotional upheaval, big challenges, big having to face really, I think, her relationship. That's kind of what it boils down to from what we're seeing in the media, is that her relationship maybe isn't the best, and it is sabotaging a future for her. So I think having to stare at that uncomfortable truth was something she had to face last week. Now, this Mercury retrograde was rough, especially for people like Taylor Frankie Paul, because she is a Gemini, and Geminis are ruled by Mercury. So it really affects Geminis, I feel, even more when you see a Mercury retrograde. So again, if you follow pop culture, the stories around Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, last week there was this big emphasis on Taylor Frankie Paul. And this past month has really brought up that All with Eclipse season 2. Now, also another wife on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Jessi, who is also a Gemini, had a big miscommunication moment on Friday when her husband filed for divorce and posted it on TMZ. So, last week, both those Geminis on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Jessi and Taylor Frankie Paul, going through big upheaval, big changes with their relationships. So I do think that for her husband to post this with TMZ, Jessi's husband, this is very messy. This is very not smart to do. He even did this really during a Mercury retrograde right before it ended. So he definitely should have, talked to an astrologer about that, because I do think he will be seeing continued repercussions and consequences for a while. When we make these kind of big announcement communication decisions that aren't so great, we're not double thinking them during a Mercury retrograde, then those like waves, the ripples that occur from them last longer and are often more unpleasant. So this is just like the Timothy Chalamet thing the other week. If you're thinking about doing or saying something nasty during a Mercury retrograde, just don't do it. It's not going to fare well for you, and you are going to continue to face those consequences, often in a way even bigger than you imagined. So he definitely should have talked to an astrologer or someone before making a choice like that. And then Jessi went on to call her daddy this week. So that just came out yesterday. She took some time over the weekend. She let the retrograde end. And I will say you can tell that she took some time to gather her thoughts, which I think was really good. And even though she did that, this interview was still kind of crazy. I listened to it. She still said a lot. She divulged a lot of information. And keep in mind that while she took some time and probably did collect her thoughts a little better than her husband posting with TMZ, she is still spilling a lot of tea information during a Mercury retrograde shadow. So I do encourage her to keep being smart about how we're processing information, the kind of information that we're putting out to the world right now. Because again, she is a Gemini. She is really going to feel the effects of anything that kind of happened or rippled during the Mercury retrograde, including the repercussions of what her husband did. So we have to be mindful of who we surround ourselves with, what energy we surround ourselves with, because that will affect us too. Another very interesting and very magic in media thing that she said that I think also applies to the situation in her Call Her Daddy episode is that she and Taylor are both Geminis, which we know, right? I will be honest, I've done a lot of deep dives on reality stars and signs, and there are not a lot of Geminis in reality TV. Geminis are a certain breed. I'm a Gemini myself. They'd like to have control. They like to know what's going on. Communication, it can be very interesting for them, right? But there is often not a lot of reality stars who are Geminis, but these two are. And what I thought was interesting is that Jessi said that while they're both going through this breakup, Jessi's getting a divorce and Taylor is breaking up with her baby daddy. While they're going through this, both of their exes who are causing trouble for them at the same time are Aquarius. So what an astrology moment there, right? You have two Gemini women, strong women, who are really, their Aquarius partners are trying to take them down. So that is a lot for those Gemini girls. But I think that's very interesting to see those two parallels, right? Like those two relationships, we've watched them play out on their show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Now we're seeing these repercussions in the media, in the news about their relationships. It's very interesting to think astrologically that you have two Gemini women with two Aquarius men, and these two Aquarius men are acting very similar at the same time. Astrology is crazy. What I will say about that is that Aquarius and Gemini are both air signs, and they are actually seen as one of the more compatible pairs in astrology. But I think what's interesting about having like a dual air sign couple, right? Like they're both air signs, is that there isn't much there to ground, right? And air signs are very cerebral. They get in their head a lot. And again, communication is a big thing with air signs. While they can really stimulate each other intellectually. I think that's one of the biggest perks of a Gemini Aquarius partnership. There can be like not enough groundedness in it. And when we're grounded, that's where we feel stable, safe, and protected, right? Those are the earth signs like Taurus, Capricorn, Virgo. So because there's no earth there to kind of ground it, I do see how couples like this can kind of get a little airheaded or like just not stable. And that is what we are seeing in these relationships and Secret Lives of Mormon Wives with this Gemini and Aquarius pairing with Jessi and Jordan and Dakota and Taylor, is that maybe we need a little groundedness, you know. And this isn't to say that all Gemini and Aquarius aren't going to work out. As a Gemini, I actually know a lot of Aquarius and have very close relationships with lots of Aquarius. I do think you just have to be more intentional about the grounding in your relationship when you're working with like two air signs. So I did want to bring up that Secret Lives of Mormon Wives little astrology moment, because I did think it was cool that Jessi even brought that up in her Call Her Daddy episode, the parallel between their astrology and their relationships. Because as I've said in this podcast before, I think a great way to learn about astrology is to look at celebrities and look at their birth charts and partnerships. And it can just get like really interesting. And, you know, you can astrology nerd out on that a lot. But yeah, that is what we were looking at last week with astrology. So our Secret Lives girls were definitely feeling it. We were definitely seeing it in the media, and just kind of a crazy storm of miscommunication for all of them, which was to be expected right as a Mercury retrograde is ending. So pay attention, you know, to the stars, pay attention to what's happening, especially when we are spreading big information or making big choices. Now, our next topic is the spring equinox. So couple words I want you to think about as soon as we say spring equinox are growth, renewal, and commitment. All right. Where do we want to grow? Where do we want to feel renewed? And where can we better commit? Those are the three words that I've kind of taken away from this week when I think of the spring equinox. So we also have a lot of holidays or religious spiritual events. Think Easter, Ostara, Ramadan, all of these events, spiritual events, holidays, religious events, this time of year represent newness, represent a fresh energy. So let's sit with that newness for a minute when we think of spring and the spring equinox and that new energy we're bringing in, the new things that we want to create. So I am going to pull a card for us as a collective, so that way we have a message for the spring as we, you know, get into this new energy. We're going to pull a card on the podcast today, but I do want you to just embrace that newness, new energy, growth, commitment, renewal. Where can you grow? Where can you renew? And where can you commit? So think about that for a second. And I am going to pull out our Way Home Tarot deck. This is probably my most used deck. We do sell it in the Vibe shop. It is a indie deck, so it's not one that you can find on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. It is independently sold, and it is a beautiful deck, so I'm very excited to use it. So if you like it, definitely check it out in our Vibe shop. But let's all just take a minute. Close your eyes, not if you're driving, listening to this, but just settle for a minute, take a deep breath, and we are going to pull our card for the collective. And I am going to read our prompt. So our prompt for this card is, what can help me welcome in this new energy? And the card we got is the Son of Wands, or the Knight of Wands. This is very fitting. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the image in this card. It's like a male figure holding a wand, because he's the Son of Wands, and there is a volcano emerging or erupting inside of him. Why this is very interesting for spring and newness is because this has a lot of Aries energy, which is going to be our next topic. But Aries is fire, right? And wands are fire. And knights move fast. They're impulsive, which is also very Aries energy. So again, for our prompt, what can this card do to help me welcome in this new energy? So go for it. If there's something you've been wanting to do, stop waiting. If there's a workout routine you've been wanting to implement, a new recipe you want to try, a new place that you want to go to, something that you've been putting on the back burner and you haven't been doing, now is the time to move forward and do it. You can embrace this new energy by not waiting anymore. The Son of Wands goes for it. He does not wait. He does not stop. He is impulse. He is forward. He is let's freaking go. Okay. And just to kind of, tarot clarify this for you, a Page of Wands is a more childlike energy, right? So they'd move a little slower. They're still maybe learning, but the Sun or the Knight of Wands, he knows, right? It's more of a teenager energy. And even if you think of teenagers, it's like they kind of just act without thinking. And there is some perks to that, right? We should be mindful, but sometimes we just have to do it, right? There's not anything else to think or overthink. We just have to go for it and do it. So to help yourself embrace this newness, this new energy, I encourage you to just do it. Stop waiting until Friday. Stop waiting until Monday. If there is something you want to do, get off your butt and go do it. All right. So that is our collective tarot card for this spring equinox and this new energy. So very exciting. I actually love that for us. And that Knight of Wands is a perfect segue into our last topic today, which is Aries season. So when we think of Aries season, which started over the weekend, I want you to think about motivation, fire, and movement. Those are my 3 words for Aries season: motivation, fire, and movement. A big message I've been getting a lot going into Aries season is moving our bodies, right? I think that moving your body and getting outside, exercise, for those of us, especially coming out of those winter months, if you live somewhere where it is cold, that is going to be very prominent going into Aries season for us, right? Lots of movement, lots of fire, get a fire in your belly, and get things moving. Aries is really the start of the zodiac. So in many ways, it can feel like a new year energy again. So as we are officially coming out of winter, you may feel like, wow, this really feels like the new year. This really feels like it's time to integrate these new habits. It's time to embrace the newness. And this is the season that we have after the Chinese New Year, right? So the Chinese New Year happens in like February, March, and this time of year, this season is the first, it's the start really of the new year after we have the Chinese New Year. And it feels extra potent this year because we are in the year of the horse, or even the fire horse, where the message is to keep moving, move forward, and keep creating, keep making. So super, super similar energy to the Knight of Wands that we just pulled. Keep going, move forward. Don't pause. Don't think about it too much. Just go after what you want and what you've been working for. And we didn't see it in the card deck that we had today, but often in tarot art, you will see a knight on a horse or riding a horse, right? So how fitting we're going into Aries season. This is the year of the horse. We just had the Chinese New Year. This forward movement is huge. This Aries season is going to bring so much movement for a lot of us. It could mean changes in job. It could mean physically moving or getting ready to physically move somewhere new. Be ready for forward movement. And like I said, I do think we are going to see a lot of people leaning into working out, running, exercising, and really moving our physical bodies to prepare ourselves for all this newness that is coming in. So don't quit now. If there is something that is on your heart or mind that you've been wanting to make or create, don't quit now. Just think that Aries equals fire. And I think it represents really the best of the fire signs because it's impulsive, it's bam, it's let's do this, it's let's go, which is good for motivation. But remember that if we burn too hot and too bright, we burn out. So find consistency in Aries season. Find consistency in your habits and routines so you're not letting that impulsiveness get away from you. Don't let that impulsiveness get a hold of you so that way you also have that toxic or negative kind of not thinking happening, right? I would say especially this comes to people when it comes to this comes up when it comes with feelings, right? So be mindful of our feelings. Aries doesn't sit well with feelings, right? And we just came out of maybe stirring up some big feelings in Aries season. So don't let impulsivity get into your feelings and feed into toxic or negative cycles. That's what I mean by that, right? When it comes to your feelings, especially during Aries season, that is when I would say to maybe not lean into the impulsiveness of Aries. I would slow down, take a beat, cool off. Again, Aries is fire, so we don't want to rage out at someone emotionally and not use that impulsiveness for good. We are all going through so much as a collective right now, so I also encourage you to welcome in some compassion during this Aries season when you start to get maybe a little ragey or fiery. Welcome in that compassion because we will feel the heat during Aries season. And like I said, I feel what we're going to be challenged by is emotions. So if you feel your emotions are rising or your temperature is rising, take a beat, show some compassion to those around you, to those in the other situations that are affecting you, and just be very mindful of what we're doing with our feelings during Aries season. Now, let's talk about some famous Aries so we can get the idea of the kind of energy that we're in and how we see it on the world stage. So, Aries is a fire sign ruled by Mars. So, astrologically, it is associated with boldness, individuality, confidence, and kind of a main character energy. So we are going to look at some musicians and actors so you can see how those traits show up and how it even affects how they've built their careers. So our first celebrity is one of my favorites, Sarah Jessica Parker. She was in Sex and the City, which even when it came out was very confident, bold, unapologetic for the time. Aries thrives when it's expressing individuality, which is a lot of what Sarah Jessica's career has been about, her individuality. Even the character Carrie is really built around her individuality, her fashion, her style, and things like that. She's very unapologetically herself, and her career reflects that as well as her personal branding. Very main character energy, very like, this is who I am, this is my style. But again, with Sex and the City, this was a show that was kind of racy, not like the norm for when it came out. And Sarah Jessica Parker was a big drive behind that. And I even think there's a little Aries aspect of if you thought about it too much, maybe she wouldn't have done it. But she went with her gut, as soon as she kind of got that project, you just kind of go for it, which is very Aries. But I will say too, she is known for fashion, her personal branding. If you are a fashion girly, you know what I mean, is very, very her. And Aries are very true to themselves. So I definitely see Sarah Jessica Parker and her Ariesness. Another Aries actress we have is Kristen Stewart. And Kristen Stewart did have a rebellious streak, kind of moving away from mainstream expectations into indie and more unconventional roles. Doesn't like being controlled and doesn't like being typecasted. So she is very well known for Twilight, right? And I think that that is a big movie, and that's what a lot of people think about when they think about Kristen Stewart. But it is very true that she kind of went away from that. She wanted to blaze her own path, which is very Aries too, right? To go for change and not feel you need to conform. Kristen Stewart did not feel the need to conform even after a big movie like Twilight. She was happy to direct on her own and pursue more indie projects. And she has been in movies for a really long time. We have to remember that Kristen Stewart had been doing movies since she was a little girl. So I can totally see why she had that Aries rebellious streak when she got older of wanting to go her own way, make her own path when she was old enough to choose that for herself. So again, makes a lot of sense with Aries. I know she's very bold in interviews too, communicating what she thinks about Hollywood and her views. She doesn't really mince words. That is a very Aries thing too. That's what I mean of they will be bold. They will go after it. And they will say what is on their mind, even if it's not popular opinion. All right, another actress, Reese Witherspoon, is an Aries. And she, again, very confident, very driven, has been in the industry for a long time. But she started her own production company in the last few years to highlight feminist books, feminist projects, very trailblazing, right? I listened to an interview where she said she made, I believe her production company is called Hello Sunshine, because she wasn't getting the kind of roles she wanted. She wasn't seeing her friends get the kind of roles they wanted. So what did she do? She blazed her own path. She made her own production company and really went for it, right? She moved forward, created something new, and now her production company does amazing. They have had Oscar-winning movies, and that was something I'm sure that was kind of scary to break into, a trail to blaze. But again, Aries are impulsive. When they put their mind to something, they go for it. They don't overthink it too much. And that pays off for them a lot. And I think that Reese Witherspoon is another example of that, especially with her production company of taking a risk and just going for it, right? She is very take charge in both her acting and her directing, which is, again, very Aries, very like driving their own path. So Reese Witherspoon as well, another Aries actress. Now we are going to talk about some musicians. The first musician we have is Lady Gaga. So she's peak Aries, fearless, provocative, and a trendsetter. Aries loves to be first and different. And Lady Gaga is constantly reinventing herself. Think the Joanne album, think Chromatica, like so different genres, different kind of music. She's not afraid to do something different. And again, blaze her own path and reinvent herself. She also leads cultural shifts. Like we see, she's a huge artist, right? I would say Lady Gaga is up there with like one of the biggest artists of our time. That's that leader energy, again, that we haven't talked about much yet with Aries, is they are leading a path, they are leading others simply by being themselves. That is how Aries lead, is they are unapologetically themselves, moving forward, embracing that main character energy. And I do feel that it draws in other people. They have a charisma about them because they are unapologetically themselves. And I think that serves them as a leader. But I will say, as leaders, Aries are they are leading by example, by being themselves. So they don't think very much in group thought. It's more of what they want, and people are kind of drawn to it. So there is an individualness in, I would say, the way Aries lead, if that makes sense. Again, they lead more by example, by being themselves, by inspiring people, than kind of working with a bunch of people, if that makes sense. So Lady Gaga is definitely one of those people where she inspires people simply by singing, performing, being herself. She's not really like in the trenches with a group being that kind of leader. So I do think that's an interesting way to look at how leadership shows up differently in different signs. Another Aries artist we have is Elton John. And Elton John has that Aries confidence. It shows through in the way he dresses. He had a very flamboyant stage presence. But again, he did what he wanted, not what was popular. He didn't just follow trends. He became the trend, right? People started to perform more crazy, outlandish when he really started to. So again, very trailblazing, very pioneer, doing something different that is your own thing, even though it's not common and what everyone else is doing, right? Not afraid to be bold, not afraid to do something different, not afraid to offend some people if it means that they are being true to themselves. And I always say a sign's greatest strength is also its greatest downfall. So sometimes it can be, Aries aren't thinking about other people. They're maybe have more of a one-track mind thinking of themselves. While that can be beneficial in some ways, we have to look at our signs, strengths in ways that maybe it's not beneficial. They're not thinking about others around them. So we can kind of manage that in our own sign of what is our strength and how can we use it to our advantage instead of our detriment. So very pioneering when it comes to Aries. We have Elton John, and even think of both of those artists' stage presence, Lady Gaga and Elton John. Very out there, crazy costumes, loud energy, loud outfits, and the way they present themselves, just very bold. So another singer, we have Mariah Carey, right? Another trailblazer, big belter, diva energy of her time, lots of confidence, known for maybe saying some crazy things in interviews sometimes, but again, very impulsive, very just saying what's on her mind and not needing to conform to what people want her to be or think that she should be. She is just comfortable being herself, take it or leave it, right? Mariah Carey, very Aries energy, and I'm obsessed. So Aries people tend to go first instead of waiting. They stand out naturally without even trying, and they take risks others maybe wouldn't, and they are not afraid to reinvent themselves without fear. So take some of that into your Aries season. Where can you take a risk? Where can you be more naturally yourself? Where can you go first? Go forward, really do what you want, create something new, create something that's the first of its kind because it's your original idea. Where can you blaze your own trail this Aries season, right? Really great inspiration from those artists of where we can, bring that energy into our own life. So that is our episode for this week. Thank you for hanging out with me and talking about all the astrology, energy, Aries season around us. I'm really excited for Aries season, really excited for this Mercury retrograde to be over, and I am ready to commit to that growth, renewal, and all the good energy we have coming. So thank you so much for listening, and as always, find the magic in your own life.